Hello everyone. OpenAI just had their first developer conference, that being OpenAI Dev Day. And in that conference, they released the announcement of 3 new APIs, that being GPT Vision, text-to-speech, and the Assistant API. So me being the developer that I am, I created 3 new projects around those APIs. So hopping right into the code, what we're going to do first is create an assistant that will help us solve our math problems. So the first thing we're going to do is import all the libraries that we need and create an instance of the OpenAI client. The next what we're going to do is create an assistant that's going to act as our math tutor. So in this situation, what we're going to be doing is assigning to the assistant variable, we're going to use the assistant's create method and pass in the name parameter, that being math tutor, the instructions, that being you are a personal math tutor, write and run code to answer math questions. The tools, now this is important, we're passing in the code interpreter tool. And this is special because this allows the assistant to be able to generate and iterate on its own Python code in order to help us answer our math questions. And lastly, we specify the model, this being the GPT-4 1106 preview model. Now you can use either GPT-4 models or GPT 3.5 models. Then moving on, the next part we're going to create is the thread. Now, effectively, this is the channel that the user and the assistant will communicate through, and it acts as a chat between those two entities. Next, we're going to create a message as a user and send it into the thread. Now, what we're going to use is the messages create method, passing in the thread ID, the role as a user, and most importantly, the content. That being, please help me solve the following equation, 3x plus 11 is equal to 14. Now, what we do next is we run the assistant. And what this does is the assistant goes into the thread, gets the latest user message, processes that user message using either the tools that it has, the retrieval method, or etc., in order to carry out the task that was passed in from the user. So as the assistant run, we need a way to check the status of the run. So one way we can do it is we'll create a while loop that checks the status of that run to see if it's whether it's completed or not. And inside that while loop, we're going to continually fetch the status of the run and check it every 2 seconds. Now, once the run completes, what we can do next is actually go inside the steps that the assistant took in order to carry out the problem solving of the equation of 3x plus 11 is equal to 14. And so how we do that is we actually use the steps list method, pass in the thread ID, pass in the run ID, and then we are able to then print out all the steps. So hopping into our second terminal over here, what we're going to do is just run all the contents inside that file in order to print out the response. Here we can see inside the response, a lot of information, but the part that you just need to look at is the code interpreter part, and more specifically, the input part. And inside of this input, you may notice that it's creating Python code. So first, it grabs from the library SymPy and imports the symbols, EQ, and solve function. Then what it does next is it defines the variable x to being symbols x, and then it defines the equation to being EQ 3x plus 11, which is equal to 14 in this scenario. Afterwards, it then solves the equation with the solution being solve equation to x, and then finally outputs the solution. And then afterward, the next step, what it does is it takes that output from the Python code and then creates it as a message and sends it into the thread. Now going back into the code, what we're going to do next is we're going to actually fetch all the messages from the thread. Now you might be wondering why we might want to do this. Well, in the case that we ever might want to create a UI, or if we want to create a front end that the user may interact with instead of through a terminal or something of a low level text editor of that sort. And just overall, it's a great way to see how the assistant responds back to the user messages based on the instructions that was passed in. So as following, what we're going to do is we're going to use the messages list method, and passing into it, we're going to pass in the thread ID, and then taking in that result from the messages, we're going to print out those results. So then hopping into the second terminal, once again, we're going to clear our terminal. Just like that. But once again, we're going to go back inside the code just so we can save it so that it actually prints out the right stuff. And then going back to our second terminal, we're then going to execute the content inside that file. And great, there you have it. So once again, a lot of information, but the important parts we need to take a look at here are the value field. And so this first message that we see is the message that we sent as a user that says, please help me solve the following equation, 3x plus 11 is equal to 14. And thus, the last message that we see is the response returned back from the assistant, which is the solution to the equation 3x plus 11 is equal to 14 is x equals 1. Hopping right into the next project, that being the API for GPT Vision, what we're going to do is pass in these two images. One of Mr. Rogers, it's a meme about it, and a second one about the AI overlords that are going to come and take all our jobs in this meme here. So first and foremost, we're going to start off with the basics, and we're going to import all the libraries and create an instance of the OpenAI client. The next, we're going to use a chat completions method that we all most likely are very familiar with. But the twist here is the model and the instructions that we pass in. Now, the model that we use in this scenario is the GPT-4 Vision, and this is the model that's specific for GPT to be able to consume and understand what's going on in images. Now, the instructions that we pass in are two types of instructions. First type of instruction is the text instructions. One we're all most likely familiar with. And in here, what it's saying is the instructions we want to carry out with the image that we're associating with it. That being the describe what the meme image is trying to convey. Now, the second instruction that we're passing in is the image URL. And in this scenario, it is the link to the image of the Mr. Rogers image that we saw from the first. And it is a link to the Imgur link or the Imgur link, depending on how you say it. And that passes into GPT-4 Vision. Now, the last part we do is pass in the max tokens, that being 300, and then we print out the response. So we're just going to save this file, head on to our second terminal, and then we're going to execute the contents of this file to see that response being passed back. Now that we have the response back, the main important thing that we need to take a look at is the content. And inside here, the GPT-4 Vision returns back this. The image is a two-panel meme using screenshots from a television show where the character Mr. Rogers is seen drawing on a flip chart. The top text reads, "Trying to be an adult like," which suggests that the meme will relate to the experience of adulthood. In the first panel, the text superimposed on the image says, "I'm not very good at it," showing Mr. Rogers with an unsure expression as he begins to draw. The second panel shows the finished drawing of a simple house with the text, "But it doesn't matter," indicating a conclusion or of acceptance of his drawing skills. The meme humorously conveys the idea that being an adult often involves doing things that one may not be particularly skilled at or confident in. But the important thing is less about being good at everything and more about accepting one's abilities and continuing anyway. The tone of the meme is lighthearted and is meant to resonate with people who feel like they are still figuring out how to manage the responsibilities and expectations of adult life. So we can see right away GPT-4 Vision has a pretty good grasp of what's going on in the image and is able to capture and understand the sentiment of the Mr. Rogers meme. So heading back right into the code, let's say we run into a scenario that we want to use an image from our local file system. Well, we can do this. So what we can do here is create a function called encode image, which accepts an image path. And then taking that image path, we're going to read down that image and then create a base 64 encoding of that image. Next, we create a variable called base 64 image with the encoding of that image, passing in the file path to the image that we have, that being AI-meme. And then finally, we call the chat completions one more time with all the same parameters as beforehand, but with the one exception is instead of passing in an image URL, we're now going to pass in a base 64 image encoding into the URL instead of the actual URL link. So same as before, we're going to save this, go to our second terminal, clear this terminal, and execute the contents of this file to see the response. Boom, there we have it. So we can see here that the content says this. This meme features an image of a humanoid robot holding a pink sticky note that reads, "You are fired," and includes the caption, "When ChatGPT fires you, it's not personal, it's just programming." The meme humorously suggests that if an AI like ChatGPT were to fire someone from their job, it would be a purely logical action with no emotional context because the decision would be based on programming rather than personal sentiment. The contrast between the traditionally negative message, "You are fired," and the smiley face adds to the humor. indicating a disconnect between the emotional understanding of such a message and a robot's unfeeling communication. So once again, we see that ChatGPT or GPT-4 Vision, sorry about that, has a clear understanding of what's going on in this image and is able to understand the sentiment once again of this AI meme that's happening. On to the last project, that being the API for the text-to-speech, that being TTS. What we're going to do, just like all the other ones, start with the basics, and we're going to import all of the libraries that we need for the code, along with creating an instance for the OpenAI client. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to use the audio speech create method, passing in the following parameters of model, being TTS1 HD, the voice, that being Alloy, and the input is artificial intelligence is here, and it is here to stay. But worry not, as a brighter future is ahead of us. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take that response and then stream it into a file path, that being output.mp3. And this is the final result that we get.
Artificial intelligence is here, and it is here to stay. But worry not, as a brighter future is ahead of us.
Okay, I had a lot of fun creating this video. And if you liked watching the video, well, please do all the usual. Subscribe, comment, like. I should probably be in the middle of the screen here. And after reviewing the video, man, I did not realize how much I was moving and kind of jittering about. But yeah, if you enjoyed it, then, well, I hope you have a great rest of your day.